Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next Alumni Career Webinar, Personal Finance for Mid-Career with Iván Watanabe from the class of 2008. I'm Maura Sweeney, Director of Alumni Career Development at Holy Cross, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar offered exclusively for Holy Cross graduates. We'll be together for an hour today. After the formal presentation, Iván will take questions from you for as long as time allows. I encourage you to submit questions throughout this presentation by checking out the question function located on your webinar control panel. This presentation is recorded and will be made available to all participants in a few days, so keep an eye out on your email. Now it's my pleasure to hand things over to Iván.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great day. It's kind of terrible weather out here in New York, but luckily we should have a good time today. So I'm excited to present a few financial insights and some strategies for you. Hopefully you can take away some ideas that you can implement on your own with your current advisors or seek another advisor to help you with your financial planning goals and process. So what I wanted to do today, again, is to share some insights and really try to understand the individuals that are on the line. Unfortunately, it's a group presentation, so each of you have a unique circumstance. So I tried to do my best to present towards an entire audience. The mid-career median salary for a Holy Cross alum is $106,000 a year, and for a $106,000 income earner, that places us in the top 10% of all income earners. If you're above 137,000, top 5%, and above 272, it places you in the top 1% of income earners in the country. And so when we make financial decisions and when we sort of evaluate the noise that is out in the marketplace and all the different people that are giving us advice, whether it be coworkers or Susie Orman or books that we're reading, just be careful on where you're actually getting the advice, and does the advice actually apply to you? Most of the time what we find out in the marketplace is that the information is for the masses. It's not for that top 10% of income earners just by volume. So if I'm writing a book, my advice will be geared more towards the individuals, the 90% based off the 10%. So today's presentation is really geared towards that top 10% of income earners, and the principles can apply to anyone, but really our advice is sort of geared towards that top 10%. You know, the first financial topic and principle that can really be boiled down for our clients has to do with a compounding curve. And compound interest, the eighth wonder of the world according to Einstein, is essentially the reinvestment of the interest that you get on an account and how that can have a snowball effect on your wealth creation over time. And the curve can kind of be broken down into three separate components or phases. The first one is what we call the foundational phase. Really, very little interest in an account gets generated over the first 10 years. And really, you know, there's not a lot of growth. The second phase, the next 20 years, is what we would call the appreciation phase. You're actually starting to see some of the growth happen inside of the foundational curve, inside of the compounding curve. And then really the magic happens on the back end of this curve. After year 20, the compounding curve really starts to take off, and your values start to accumulate at a much higher rate, at a much higher value. So 401ks are a really good example of sort of the forcing of people to stay on this compounding curve over their lifetimes. And so the government forces us, for the most part, to stay on this curve, and we can't really access the money before 59 and a half under current law. And so if you start at year one and over a 30-year career, you've been saving into these retirement plans and haven't been accessing that account, you would have that experience and hopefully be able to retire with a high enough value number, taxes aside for a second, but just from a compounding growth figure. Okay. one of the mistakes that we see clients making or people making over time is not actually allowing their money to compound. They're not staying on their curve. They're constantly starting and stopping and starting and stopping on the curve, and not consistently saving and not consistently investing their money over time, and having fits and starts on the curve, so that when they retire, they're somewhere down here and not somewhere up here. Okay. The other thing, and sort of the reason why we need our assets to continue to compound, is that there's so many headwinds against our growth and our wealth creation over time. Just to name a few, the factors that are working against us as we accumulate assets over time and pulling against us are debt, interest rate risk, market risk, inflation, everybody's favorite, taxes, the government changes the rules on us, and unforeseen events. And so I just wanted to pull aside a couple of these for you today and really dive a little bit deeper into various ways that we can hedge against these factors that are working against us. The first one, protecting against the unforeseen, really making sure that you address the risks that can impact your ability to grow your wealth and to save on this curve over time. And some of the ideas that we would help our clients with or encourage you to take advantage of with your own advisors or in your own planning are maximizing your employee benefits, right? Really taking a look at what benefits are offered and making sure that you are doing everything you can to maximize those benefits. Review your auto and home insurance, your umbrella insurance, your business insurance policies. Consistently update your wills, trusts, healthcare proxies, your buy-sell agreements. Making sure that you are protected against any illness, injury, or disability. Part of that will be taken care of through your employee benefits, most likely, and some might be secured out in the open marketplace. Properly structuring your life insurance portfolios, and then hedging longevity risk in retirement. The idea is, and I'll take lawsuit as a very simple example, umbrella insurance and auto and home insurance can help protect you against a potential accident and lawsuit. So your car or your home will be replaced through that policy. But when it comes to wealth building, we want to make sure that if something were to happen and you were in an accident and underinsured and that other individual sued you, that would have a significant impact on your ability to continue to compound money and to grow on that financial curve. So that is a very easy example of a fit and start that would happen on the financial curve for you. Okay. We also, in planning, we want to make sure that we identify your particular risk tolerance. Everybody likes to discuss different rates of return and what they're getting out in the marketplace and what their colleagues are doing in their 401k plan. It's really important that you understand your own personal investment behavior and what your advisor would recommend as well, and then conventional wisdom. And so, hopefully you all download the presentation after it's done, and I would encourage you to sort of use this chart when identifying what your particular risk tolerance is. And so one of the things that we would take a look at for clients is, what's the time frame in which I would want to access this particular bucket of money, perhaps this particular bucket of money, and this bucket of money. Okay. And when addressing each bucket, we want to make sure that we identify what's our actual risk tolerance on a given year. So in a time frame where I'm going to want to touch the money between 1 to 2 years, maybe we can shoot for a 2% interest rate in the bank right now, and we would have no loss. There's no negative returns inside of my bank account. In a 3 to 5 year span, let's say I'm targeting a 4 to 5% rate of return, and in a given year targeting a 4 to 5% rate of return, maybe I lose 5%. Would I be okay with that? Would I be able to stomach that? Could I sleep at night? Is that something that would be sustainable for me? And would I want to liquidate that account if I started to lose money on it? Really try to identify what your behavior is with your investment accounts, and will I stick to that game plan over time? Perhaps this 10 plus is a positive 10%, but maybe in a given year I could lose 15%. Would I be okay with that? So making sure that you identify your particular risk tolerance and not anyone else's. Another wealth eroder that I want to address, and again, a lot of people like to discuss it, is the marginal tax rates. The government is always in our pockets trying to get what they're entitled to, and we want to make sure that we address and we plan and we save in the right environments, in the right asset allocation, the right location, so that we can continue to grow our wealth over time. So when we take a look at the U.S. marginal tax rate from 1913 to 2018, what you'll notice is that we're in today's environment, we're actually in one of the lowest tax environments ever. It's pretty interesting to see that as much as we're complaining about taxes, we really are in one of the lowest marginal tax rates ever. Taxes have been as high as 92%. I don't think we're going anywhere there anytime soon. But when looking at your planning and assuming that tax rates will have to rise, I don't know what your beliefs are, but my belief is that over time tax rates will most likely rise, given the debt and sort of where we are as a country. Then we have to take a look at the different buckets of money that we can invest in and save into, and really take into account the way that asset is taxed when I'm going to utilize those dollars. So the first bucket is what we would consider tax today money. Cash, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, brokerage accounts, business equity, and real estate. And when the money goes into those accounts and gets invested, they're after-tax contributions. Okay, so the government has already taken my taxes away when it hits my bank account from my paycheck. And then I take that money and I go buy Apple stock. And when the money comes out, I pay $0 on the money that I invested. So let's say I take $1,000 from my checking account that's already been taxed, and I invest it in Apple stock, and it grows to $1,500. The original $1,000 investment comes out tax-free. But any growth that I have, the $500 of growth, as long as it's a long-term capital gain, I'll have to pay 23.8% between capital gains and Obamacare. The next bucket, what we would consider tax advantaged, inside of that you have Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, 529 plans, municipal bonds, and whole life, cash value of whole life insurance. And the way that bucket works is when the contribution is made, again, just like in the first bucket, $1,000 goes in, it's after-tax money. And when the money comes out, every dollar of it is going to be tax-free. The last bucket, tax-deferred money, you have your 401ks, 403bs, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, Social Security, and annuities. And the way that bucket is taxed is when the money goes in, you don't pay taxes on it today. It's not a tax savings, it's a tax deferral. Meaning when the money comes out of the account, every dollar of it, both principal and interest, are all subject to future ordinary income tax rates. And again, going back to our previous conversation, if you believe that your tax rate in the future, based off of current tax rates, will be higher in the future, then you really want to take a look at tax today and tax advantage money. It makes more sense in many circumstances, especially for individuals that think they're going to make more income over their lifetimes, okay, and are earning lower incomes today than they will in the future, you want to take a look at paying the taxes today so that when you distribute the assets from whatever account that you're taking it from, it will be fully tax-free or long-term capital gains rather than ordinary income taxes, where I think every economist, again, is saying that the tax rates will be higher than they are today in the future. The last paradigm shift that I wanted to share with you guys today is a concept that we constantly hear out again in the marketplace, which are always talking about average rates of return. And our contention is that average rates of return don't actually matter in retirement, but there's something that you have to make sure you address correctly. So for today's example, we have a 40-year-old with a $250,000 balance, not taking out any money, with no increase. We just gave this 40-year-old an 8% average rate of return over a 25-year span and not accessing any of the money. In this column, we have negative rates of return late, and in this column, we have early negative rates of return. We just mirror imaged the rates of return over a 25-year period, averaging 8%. And what you'll see is that at the end of that 25-year span, this individual ended up with the same amount of money. The experience was very different for both individuals, but they ended up with the same amount of money. So now this person is 65. They've got $1.4 million. Again, let's just give them a 5% rate of return and mirror image them late negative rates of return and early negative rates of return. What you'll see, just like in the first example, they end up with the same $4 million. So when does average rate of return actually matter? It matters in retirement when we go to take withdrawals from our account. So again, in this example, they both start off with $1.4 million, but instead, we're going to take out the 5% that we're earning. We're going to take out $70,000 a year over retirement age. We mirror the same 5% rate of return, but they have very different ending balances. The individual with negative rates of return late, when they withdraw money, they spend $70,000 a year and they end up with $1.2 million. This individual that had early negative rates of return ends up almost running out of money at age 90. And then to take it a step further, if we add cost of living adjustments with inflation, this person actually does run out of money. So when building out your retirement plans, you need to make sure that you have instruments in place where you can take money and actually let your accounts rebound and not access money when your account is down. If your retirement plan is just to take interest from your investment portfolio or your retirement account, then you have a chance of being this person. So we want to make sure that we have assets to buffer these types of downturns in the market, whether that be cash value life insurance, annuities, other income generating properties where we wouldn't have to actually touch this account and we could let it rebound for us to live off of other assets during that time. So where do we go from here? I think for everyone on the line, I would, again, if your planning is done on your own with an existing advisor or you're looking for one, I would make sure that you evaluate and properly structure your insurance portfolio. That's across the board. Property and casualty insurance, employee benefits, personal lines of insurance. You want to make sure that it's structured correctly, positioned well, and actually ensuring the things that it needs to. Because once a life event has occurred, there's no coming back from it. You know, insurance is the only product where once an event takes place, you may not be able to qualify for it again. You know, we can buy Apple whenever we want. We can buy, any other position whenever we choose to. But insurance needs to take place prior to a life event happening. You want to make sure you identify your available resources for savings and investing. I would go through your cash flow. Make sure that you understand where you're saving, where you're investing money, and build out a strategy to identify what your available resources are. For most clients, especially younger ones, if we can get you to save anywhere between 20 to 25% of your gross income, we could put it into cash over your lifetime, and you would be just fine in retirement. Savings rate is substantially more important than rate of return. So once you identify your available resources that you're able to save and invest, it's important to make sure you determine your appropriate risk tolerance. Now, how much what's my risk appetite, not anyone else's? What am I comfortable with that I can develop a plan and a strategy that I can stick to? Make sure you deploy your assets to an appropriate tax bucket. What's the right strategy for me? How much should I have in tax deferred? How much should I have in tax free? And how much should I have in taxable capital gains accounts? And a diversification is always a good strategy, but really identify where am I today with my income, my tax rates, where do I think I'll be in the future and where do I think tax rates will be, and then develop a plan with your advisor to do so after that. And I think consider partnering with an advisor if you haven't already. Everyone on the line, regardless of income, should be speaking to some sort of advisor. I think people need great advice, and there are a lot of great advisors out there. And so you want to make sure that you are bouncing ideas off of a professional that can help you build out a strategy that is appropriate for you. Tax laws change, products change, strategies change and evolve over time, and life gets more and more and more complicated. So my suggestion for everyone is to consider partnering with an advisor. If you are looking for one, these are the different ways for you to partner with an advisor. I would start by asking your trusted friends and family, the people that you respect the most and you believe that have your best intention at heart. Identify whether or not you think a fee for plan is the way for you to go or not. I personally rarely charge a fee for my plans for clients. There are other advisors who have fee-based planning practices. It's a matter of preference for an advisor, and really try to identify if that's something that's important to you. Be open, honest, and upfront with your goals, aspirations, and feelings. When we design these plans for clients, we take all of those different aspects into account. So the more open, the better the communication, the more upfront you are with your desires, the better the plan will be. I would stick to the strategies that you develop with your advisor, constantly address them, but make sure that you stick to the plan. Trying to start and stop on your plan is not a winning strategy. And then make sure that the advisor is delivering on the promises that were made. Okay. Again, everyone on the line should have an advisor. understand what you want your relationship to be with your advisor. Would you prefer it just be transactional? Hey, set me up with an initial plan and I'll contact you in a couple of years, or would you prefer something more holistic? Our preference at Opus is to have a holistic financial plan. We have in-depth, constant communication with our clients because it's the only way for us to plan. I spent 30 minutes yesterday discussing with one client how to explain to her husband that she now makes substantially more money than him. Finance has become a tricky topic in some households. Spent another 30 minutes last week talking to a client about whether or not he can afford to leave his corporate job. If you find value in those conversations, then find an advisor that can give you that. If not, if you really just want a transactional relationship, there's nothing wrong with that either. Find one that will service those particular needs. So, I thought I would open it up to some questions. Thank you all for the time, and my contact information is here below. Feel free to reach out if you have any particular questions or things that you didn't want to ask on the line. But I appreciate it and look forward to speaking soon.
Thank you very much, Iván. That was really, really helpful. And I do have a few questions that have come in over the course of the presentation. And for those of you who have some questions that have kind of bubbled up, please find the question feature on your control panel and type them in there. The first question that I'll ask came through upon registration. So how should personal finance strategies shift during the years of paying college tuition for our children and then again afterwards?
Yep. So I think every individual plan is different.
Mm-hmm.
And in identifying college planning strategies, you have to figure out whether or not cash flow is a place where we can take money to pay for college, whether saving early on in a 529 plan is the right strategy for you. Mm-hmm. Leverage, so utilizing like a home equity line of credit. I always believe that using somebody else's money to pay for something is much better than using my own. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is just going back to that compounding curve conversation.
Yeah.
So if I leverage money for college from a home equity line of credit, the value of my home continues to increase, even though I've unlocked the value to go pay for college. Because once you let go of that money for college, you're never getting that money back.
Right.
And the cost of college is not only the tuition, but it's also the lost opportunity cost on those funds. Now, it's a necessary cost for many families, and it's not really a cost, more of an investment. But I think when you plan, I like to utilize an investment strategy where I can save money into one spot
mm-hmm.
that is a catch-all. So whether the money needs to be used for college or the money needs to be used for an investment project or buying a building or an emergency, that I can access that capital no matter what. If I go back, let's see if I can go back the presentation here. College is a really good one, right? Because if I believe in the concept of compound interest and I'm building up, and right before I hit this third phase, I send my child to college,
mm-hmm.
that asset now starts back down to zero.
Yep.
So when I continue to invest, let's say I was putting $1,000 a month away, it's now starting from zero. So if we have an investment account or we have a strategy where it's a catch-all and those dollars need to be used for college, great. If not, they could be used for something different.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. That's really good to think about. Well, another question that came in is, how do you evaluate private investments outside the market? Is there a target balance between stocks, bonds, and other private?
That's a great question. Every individual situation is different.
Yep.
I think you have to understand what your liquidity needs are at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
So many outside investments, to get your money back, either will take a 10-year time frame or sometimes even longer to even get that capital back.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand what your liquidity needs are first and foremost. The stock can be sold whenever, a bond can be sold almost whenever. So you can liquidate those accounts whenever you want to use the money for whatever it is that you would need for consumption use.
Mm-hmm.
But if you over leverage and you over invest into that asset and it goes down to zero, how does that impact your balance sheet? So you want to make sure that you understand liquidity needs, but also if that money went to zero, what impact would it have on your overall plan?
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Can I no longer send my child to college or pay my mortgage because I locked this money up for 10 years and it went to zero?
Yeah. Right. Right. Okay. Well, another person wrote in with a hypothetical question, and it's a little bit long, so bear with me here. So, suppose that someone opened a 401k through their former employer that has approximately $4,000 today. That person also has another retirement account, but it's a 403b through yet a different former employer, and that one also has the same amount, about 4,000. Is it better to simply open a new retirement account at age 30 or roll those funds into a new one? They're trying to figure out for tax purposes if the new retirement account should be a Roth as opposed to a regular 401k. Is it smart to have several retirement accounts through several former employers or just have one?
Okay. So let me tackle it one at a time. I think
Sure.
um, having one IRA is most likely going to have a better outcome over time because of compound interest.
Yep. Yep.
So consolidating that asset, if you believe that an IRA and you have a good investment strategy with low fees is going to yield you a good result over time, having an $8,000 balance to work with is better than two $4,000 accounts.
Right.
So, and the tax consequence of moving your 401k and 403b into one IRA is not a taxable event. So when you roll the money into that IRA, it is not a taxable event.
Oh, okay.
If you chose to create a Roth IRA with those dollars, so you can do a Roth conversion, which is essentially taking that 8,000, paying the taxes today on that money,
Yep.
and turning it into a Roth IRA so that all of the growth and the principal will all be tax-free on the back end is definitely something to consider for many people.
Mm-hmm. Do you
Did I
have to
answer
worry?
her question?
Yeah, and this is a question I'm going to ask. If I have no expertise in the area, but do you have to worry about any sort of capital gains that may have occurred in those accounts before? Is that taxable or
No.
is that not
So,
something to worry about?
yeah. So all you have to do with 401k accounts and IRA accounts is just the principal and the principal and the interest. So yes, every dollar
Yep.
that gets distributed from that 401k, from that 403b in retirement will be subject to taxes.
Yep. Gotcha.
Is that the question?
Yep. 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 Thank you. So then another question is about independent contractors who don't have employee benefits.
Okay.
How do you determine the right provider and coverage for disability and professional liability?
Yep. So for disability insurance, you have to look at the financial strength of the carrier, also for any insurance company, the financial strength of the carrier and their track record of paying claims. There are certain carriers out there that have a much better track record of paying claims than others. The other thing to consider with disability insurance is the definition of disability. You want a true own occupation disability policy. So I'll give you an example. There are a lot of disability policies that would not pay you if you could be the receptionist at the front desk. You have to be completely disabled in order for that disability policy to pay.
Oh.
And so you want a policy that covers you for your particular role at your particular time, and the true own occupation policy will change over time. So my policy, if I decided to leave my industry and go become a police officer, it will then cover me if I got disabled as a police officer. Same with business insurance. You just want to make sure that you look at the actual language around what's a triggering event for that policy to be applied.
Yeah. Well, and back to the first part about finding out if the company has a history of paying out their claims, how would you find that information?
There are a lot of industry sources. You want to look at the insurance commission in your particular area.
Yep.
Also contact your advisor and ask them to show you several different options and why they would choose one versus another.
Okay. Okay. That's helpful to know. Let's see. Another question came in. So they were curious about the figure that you stated that the Holy Cross mid-career median income was at 106. What would you consider mid-career?
That's a good question. Mid-career is probably someone around late 30s, late 40s.
Yep.
The information came from, I believe it was PayScale.
Okay.
From the Holy Cross website, but that's what I would consider mid-career.
Okay. Okay. Great. That person also says thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question for you. If I am maxing out my standard IRA contributions annually through my job, would you recommend diversifying between traditional IRA and Roth for tax purposes upon retirement?
Yes. Again, my belief is that tax rates will rise, and it's important for us to understand what that liability will look like in the future. You know, I'll give a pretty easy example. You know, tax rates, again, were in the 72 percentile when 401ks were invented. So if I put money into a 401k or I put money into a 403b or an IRA at and taxes were at 72%, that's a great bet. Because even if my rate of return in my account was 0%, but taxes went down, I would make money on that transaction. Today, we're doing the exact opposite. If my belief is that tax rates are low, I'm saving at a 37% rate to eventually take my account value and my income at whatever the value is and whatever the tax rate is in the future. And again, my belief is that taxes will rise.
Yeah.
So if you can do it, I would recommend paying the taxes today and having that asset be tax favorable upon distribution.
Okay, great.
And by the way, just as a caveat, I mean, I have this conversation with a lot of CPAs, and their belief is always tax deferral. The reason why I think most CPAs believe that is because we actually hire and fire and judge CPAs by their ability to get us a larger tax return today. And so their job is to say, well, in 2018, here's what we did. but most CPAs are not projecting retirement distribution plans and where to fund college from. And so they're not actually building out true strategies for clients. They're just saying last year, and again, this is a broad generalization, but my experience is that it's simply a look back at what happened last year and how do I get the largest tax return today.
Okay. Seems like it's kind of nice to have some honest conversations and get to see, two sides of the equation, two different considerations. Here's a question on a 529 plan versus opening an IRA for college expenses. They added the additional thought that the risk of a 529 is having a child decide not to go to school. Is the IRA better for flexibility?
So an IRA cannot be touched without a penalty and taxes due until you're 59 and a half. So I wouldn't use an IRA for college planning unless you will be older than 59 and a half when your child goes to college. The 529 plan risk is if they decide not to go to college, or they get a scholarship, or the rules change. So the problem with 401ks, 403bs, frankly, anything with a number in the title is that the government regulates those rules. And they get to change them as they please. So right now on the table in Congress, they are looking to push back the required minimum distribution age to 72 and a half, not 70 and a half. They recently changed the 529 plan rules so that you can use them for private school. So they're constantly changing the rules and regulations, and you don't really know what's going to apply when your child actually needs to go to school. I would, in many circumstances, have a conversation around utilizing just a regular brokerage account for college, or the cash value inside of life insurance for college, because you can use it just like you can a 529 plan in terms of the tax-free distribution of it. So you really have to kind of identify what's appropriate for you, but I have no idea what college is going to cost 18 years from now. Right. Who knows what schools will cost and what tuitions will look like and what your child decides to do. That's why for me, when we build out these strategies, flexibility and liquidity is really, really important, because I have a client yesterday who she was able to find a loophole where having one non-custodial parent with a lower income in one of their other homes was taking care of the child. So her income didn't apply. She got a substantial reduction in her tuition and a very high financial aid. But she has $170,000 in a 529 plan. So, what does she do? Well, now she has to take a 10% penalty and pay taxes on that money because she made a smart move with her housing and how she applied for college. So it's something to really consider in terms of how flexible do you want your strategies to be.
Okay. Here's another question on 401k. So they say if you're hitting the 401k max contribution limit, are you unable to put money in other tax deferred products in that same year?
You can put money into an IRA.
Okay.
You can put it into a non-deductible IRA. But really, I would, and again, it depends on what your particular situation is. If you're a business owner, there are different ways to put substantial amounts of money in a tax-deferred vehicle. A SEP IRA can go as high as $55,000, and then there are another deferred compensation ways to structure it. But for normal W-2 employees, you're really limited to how much money you can defer because, the government wants some of their money today as well.
Right, right. Okay. Well, that's the last of the questions that I have. So unless anyone has a burning question that they haven't yet asked, I would say that now is the time to quickly type it in, while it looks like Yvonne's bringing us back to his closing slide. I don't see anything coming in. So I really want to thank you, Yvonne, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. This, for me personally, has been really good to learn about. And for the rest of you, if you're interested in following up with Yvonne, as you can see, his contact information is on the screen. If you miss it or have to rush off and aren't able to write it down, just email me in the alumni office. I'm at alumnicareers@holycross.edu. I'm happy to provide that for you. And thank you all for joining us. A recording of this presentation will be available on the Holy Cross Alumni Career Development website, usually by next week, and you'll receive an email when it's posted. The email will come from me. You will also receive a short email survey after this webinar, and I encourage you to please share your feedback with us. We use that to decide what topics to cover in these webinars. And if you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to me in the alumni office. I encourage you to join us next month, where we'll hear from another alum, Deborah Deroni, from the class of '89 on leadership. Again, I want to thank Yvonne so much for speaking with us today, and I hope all of you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.